The Track Stitch podcast brought to you by Frosty Boy Ice Creams. Coming up, Shano and I have made it to 10 episodes of the podcast. We're going to talk about just how difficult it is to put on the track and field podcast of the people, the number one track and field podcast on the interweb. Plus, we've got some great news coming through about Kenesisa Bekele and Jakob Ingebrigtsen. All that and more. But first, you guys know the drill. It's the number one jingle for track and field podcasts on the internet. It's the Track Stitch Band.
Champion! Riders bearing down on top of Ngugi. Ngugi digs deep and he's got no ball. And Andrew Lloyd wins it up.
Récupéré ensuite chez lui au Maroc à Ifrane.
La Web, il est parti à la Web, il a tenté le coup du siècle là.
Oui,
surprendre tout le monde. Au 800.
Final of the men's 10,000 meters in 19.
Not the ball out, who it looks to be. Who else is in the race? The wave is there, the confidence is there.
Okay, recording the podcast. It is Saturday, October the 25th, Sunday, October the 26th in Auckland, New Zealand, where Shane Rhodey is sitting on Shortland Street. Shano, how you doing?
Yeah, I knew what day it was because it's my sister's birthday, or was my
Ah.
sister's birthday. So going out for the old, having her over actually for the odd salmon. She loves salmon bagels, the old salmon bagel breakfast shortly. So that'll be good.
Big E, legend
Big E.
of the game, meaty.
Legend of the game.
Awesome. Hey, so last week we talked about how the track and field season is winding down. It makes the content game a little bit more difficult for us. So, thought today, one of the things I realized is that and I mentioned it in the intro, we've hit 10 podcasts together, mate. We've technically done 11 because I did the Rogue one with Peeve, but 10 podcasts for you and I. And I thought it'd be really interesting just to sort of reflect on those podcasts and just, let the people, the fans, the hundreds of thousands of fans of the Track Stitch podcast in on just how difficult it is to do this, because this was definitely something new for me. Not quite new for you, but yeah, I think it's just an interesting thing to talk about.
I love the Gary V reflections on his podcasting, the old Wine Library TV, and his podcasts are incredible now. But he shows when he's got the old sort of Jim Carrey from Dumb and Dumber haircut, and he's got the bottle of wine and like the kind of cheap turtleneck on, and he's like, pushing his wine collection back in like 1990 something or like 2002, and it just looks so disheveled and shitty. And his number one message is, you've got to really do it for yourself or people you think are like you. And so in our context, that means sort of Ken Maloney's and your Richard Swans. I know you guys will both be listening. People who are nerdy track fans like us, and you really cannot care about whether you get a lot of traction or interest, and you have to do it from the heart. And that's what you do as well. Look at this project as something we're interested in, and that's the only thing that gets you out of bed to do it. Be consistent and do it every week.
Well, especially for you, because you've got to do it you got to get out of bed at like 6 a.m. in the morning to get to the studio.
I actually have a better
different from
day on my weekend. I have a better day when I do this, because you get up and you get to talk about something that's not work. You get to, catch up with you, and it's cool. I love it. And it's like the consistency thing is the hardest thing. I know if I didn't have you to do it with every week, because it's an avocation, not a vocation or like a business thing. You just, some weeks would go, asked doing a track and field podcast that, 18 people watch, at 7 a.m. on a Saturday or Sunday morning. But no, it's a great thing to do.
It's true, because we, obviously I hope that the people that do listen to the podcast realize that when we talk about all the hundreds of thousands of fans and stuff, that's not the case at all. You can actually see it on YouTube, right? Like, it's not very many at all, but it doesn't matter, right? That's not the point. And I think like what you're saying is that you got to start from somewhere, and you hope that people will join in, like, or want to share like our passion of the sport and the way that we approach it. It's not just like looking at recent results. We'd try to tap into the guys that and the women out there, of course, everybody inclusive, that sort of love the sport and the history of the sport and those kind of things. But it's really not easy, right, to sort of jump on and come up with things to talk about in a coherent fashion for 45 minutes to an hour. But in saying that, it's funny, every time we get on here and start off, it's just crazy how the time goes by, because obviously we love the sport, right?
We love the sport, and I always just think to myself, would I watch this, or would I be interested in this? And I know there's not many, thankfully. Thankfully, I'm sure some people think not too many of me out there or you out there, and but we are out there, and we hide in little nooks and crannies,
Right.
and your Jeff Shaws of this world as well. People like that, they just love the sport. We love it, and I haven't done it competitively since I was 25.
Yeah.
Yet I could hand on heart say, like, most days I'll go and let's run.
Yeah.
Just if I'm waiting for a meeting or
Of course.
scrolling in bed on a weekend morning. And I just love it. It's not because I was half decent at it. It's because I just find it interesting. And that's where it's aimed. I know a lot of people, like I showed my mate, another lawyer, and he was like, oh, very niche. In other words, who the frick would watch that? And fair enough, like, that's cool. And my friend Michael Moen, who I've talked to you about, and you'll meet him when you come over next time, is a super bright guy. I did quite a lot of podcasts with on the legal subjects. He had this great saying to me once. We're talking about how when you're younger and you think that your shit doesn't stink and what you're interested in is cool, and you scoff at other people doing other things, you're like, oh, that sucks, or look at these guys. And he had this great point. He said, look, pretty much everything in life, once you've sort of dealt with the basics, like food, water, and roof over your head, pretty much all of it is some form of masturbation, some or other form of masturbation. And he goes, and the great conceit of human beings is to think that your masturbation is better than someone else's form of masturbation. At the end of the day, we're all just masturbators, and we're all trying to sort of fill the void, so to speak, of meaning and purpose and just things to be into. And so if you can just get over that and get on with it, not the act itself, but
we're definitely not being coded as a child-friendly podcast. We've set the record for the most M words, masturbation references in recent memory. But you're right, yeah. No,
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't. When we first started doing this, you and I, we're perfectionists to different degrees, right? And I don't know. I think we both decided, hey, we're going to record the first couple of podcasts, and we'll just try and watch them ourselves. We won't actually put them up for public consumption. So we didn't. We did a couple of kind of trial runs before we've realized that we were, not even good at this, but that it wouldn't be an absolute disaster. I don't even know. Have you even watched like the first couple of episodes? Because I'll be 100% honest, it was very difficult for me to even watch clips of those because I'm so kind of self-critical and such a perfectionist. I was just like, oh, I don't even know if I can bring myself to watch it because I'll be too self-critical. But I will say this, as we've got more and more deeper into this and reached 10 episodes, I now actually watch them back because I want to hear what we're doing well, what we can do better, what I can do better. Were you like that?
Other than your one when you did it without me, I wanted to, and also your one with Peeve, which I watch it a little bit of. When I started doing the legal ones, I was heavily watching all the Gary V content and a few other sort of content maker podcasts. And the overwhelming theme I picked up is never watch your own shit and don't be self-critical, because no one else cares whether you and or what you say anywhere near as much as you do. And you just need to get over yourself and do it and not be worried. And that was the best bit of advice I got out of Gary V and all those people. And if you actually go and look at the internet and you look at, there are some people out there who are incredibly successful at this and prolific. Number one, when they started, they sucked, which I'm sure in global terms, if we look back, we still do. Number two, you can tell that they've just got on with it. And the ones who actually do well out of it and maybe even make money out of it, they're the ones who just consistently produce content and learn on the go. And they're actually not very self-critical. There's a principle, I always forget the name of it, about people. And a lot of my business clients, they're like that. They're not brighter. They're not funnier. But they're hardworking and consistent, and they get on with it. And if they make mistakes, they don't get neurotic about it. They just keep going and they learn. that's the same with podcasting. You just got to do it and you've got to enjoy it.
I remember, so I think I told you this one. It was during the World Champs, and you were in New York and in LA.
Yes.
And we recorded, I think, when you were in LA on the Saturday. And that was one day before the final session, and you were vacationing with Rose. I didn't want you to jump on twice, and also to sort of cover the final day of action or the final session. And I did it myself. And I think it was about 20 or 30 minutes long. And it is crazy how difficult it is to do it by yourself. Like, just to look into a computer screen and to try and come up with legible thoughts and not get lost in your own thoughts and begin rambling and that kind of stuff. And honestly, I mean, I'm sure you could believe this, but man, I maybe did like, for a 30-minute little clip that I attached to the end of the pod, of the original pod, I think it was probably at least 3 hours of recording. And I look, just as I was going back, like you would, because it's crazy, you go through and you do, say, 20 minutes well, and then you make a horrible mistake and you're like, oh no, I just got to do it again, because that's just my nature. But the good thing is like, I always took it as like a learning process. I wasn't too hard on myself. I was like, oh, I fucked it up. It's fine. We'll just go back and do it again and you'll learn. And even down to one of them, I had finished and I was happy with it. And I went back and listened. I realized how many times I was like umming and ahhing. I'm like, it just sounds terrible. And to your point, I know that you, just said you can't be so harsh on yourself with that respect, because nobody else picks up on it. It is crazy how when you get fixated on sort of this little error that you're making, it just compounds and you're like, I can't do it. But all in all, just as a general thing, it just really gives you a lot of respect for these guys who do this for a living. Because, I mean, we don't do this for a living. It's just sort of like you said, an avocation for us. These guys that do it like full time, like, a lot of respect how they constantly come up with things to talk about and the content, the way they deliver it. So, yeah, it's just been a really exciting journey, even though we're only 10 podcasts in, and hopefully there's tenfold more of these to come over the next couple of years. But yeah.
I told you my mentor, I think I've told you this on the podcast, my mentor, John Banks, he was doing some work with Margaret Thatcher in the 80s, and he went door knocking, and he said, how would it go out there, young John? And he said something like, well, ma'am, people out there, they don't much like you. And she said, it's not important to be liked, Mr. Banks. It's important to be respected. And there's a lot of podcasts that to this day, I wouldn't say I like them. They're like, some of them are snake oil salesmen. Some of them are just annoying. I'm sure many people think that about our podcast, but tell you what, nearly all of those people now, I have mad respect for the fact they are not sitting on the couch eating spicy tomato munchos on a Saturday morning, or they're every week they're putting themselves out there, which is difficult for people because they feel like they're going to get judged. It's never those people that are out there doing that. They would have overall a much better life than another version of themselves that didn't do it. And just the people who are on the keyboard warriors go, oh, look at this guy, or look at this chick, like, look at them, this is bullshit. Well, you're not doing it. They're actually getting over themselves. They're fighting that battle of, that chronic, public speaking is one of the most feared things in the world. It's almost more than like going to the dentist, all sorts of other supposedly sort of fear-inducing actions. So
First
to do it, he first told tee off at the NZ run with 30 other twats sitting there watching you.
Weasels,
you're going to duck hook it into the bush.
Ready to laugh at you, even though they're going to duff it themselves.
Yeah. So it's a good thing to do, and very uplifting. All right, should we get into because I've only got, what time is it? I've got Rick's birthday. My sister's birthday. I'll leave here in about 40 minutes. So
yeah, 40 minutes. Okay. So I think just moving forward, like, just to round out the podcast topic, we've got to come up with a few ideas for the colder, well, actually it's summer for you, but the colder winter months here of the European or professional track season. Any ideas? Maybe we could do some kind, we've got to figure out something to, like, a long-term project, maybe like a fantasy draft of something. Maybe we've got to assemble a team. We've got to do like a long-term review of maybe all different events. Are we going to find out the greatest track athlete, the greatest field athlete? We've got to come up with some ideas. So we don't have to have the answer obviously right now, but we'll throw it out to the 14 people that regularly watch the podcast, and maybe they can comment on some ideas. But we got to come up with something, Shano, to fill the void. But yeah.
All right. Do you want to hit us with those topics?
All right. So, some news coming through, some exciting stuff regarding Kenesisa Bekele. He has been announced for the New York Marathon.
Yeah.
That's just the news. No, I mean, I had down in the notes here. So that sort of just doubles on. I mean, there's actually a couple of things that we can discuss here, which I think are kind of interesting. When you think about Kenesisa Bekele, like, is this guy the greatest runner of all time? Is he the greatest distance runner ever? What is his best career achievement? We had this podcast a couple of weeks ago where we talked about the torch theory, about how potentially, we looked at the legacy of, like, for example, Sada Wheater and Nuruddin Morsali, about how we don't maybe see those guys as their legacies being so strong because Morsali took immediately over from Wheater, and then El Garouge came over, took immediately over from Morsali. I was just thinking, it's like crazy with Bekele, as good as he was, does it feel like maybe his legacy isn't crazily as strong as potentially what it should be, given his list of career achievements?
I'll tell you why I think that's the case. So, as you know, I'm an avid sports card collector, and the value of a sports card is heavily dependent on the personality of the athlete as much as how many rings they've won. I talk about basketball here, and how they play in terms of their flair, like the dunks and how aesthetically pleasing they are. For example, Shaq, the big men often struggle, and then they're sort of your guys like obviously Jordan, LeBron, but Kobe Bryant, who had all that flair and had that sort of story around him at the Lakers, and he stayed there his whole career. I would call Kenesisa Bekele a rare exception to the whole torch principle. Maybe it's a torch rejection.
Yeah.
Because Kenesisa Bekele, despite all his achievements, I feel like he's just always wanted to be Geb. Geb was the forerunner. Apparently, he's always been very jealous of Geb in terms of, and he's now trying to do all these things like Geb, like building hotels. And Gebre Selassie had the smile. He had even though he didn't speak a lot of English, he had the sort of charm,
charisma.
The charisma associated with a great champion, and he kind of pioneered that. Early 90s, mid 90s boom. He lowered the world records by when he ran 12:44. He was, a lot of people out there know who Haile Gebre Selassie is, like lay people from that era. They'll remember that guy. Bekele less so, even though I would say as a athlete, Kenesisa Bekele is a better athlete than Haile Gebre Selassie.
Yeah, and he, to that point, he did technically, under the conditions of the theory we discussed or came up with, he did torch Geb, because it was that 2003 World Championship 10K final where he was that was his first global championship. He came on, he ran 12:57 for the final 5K of that, like, awesome, what was it, 26:50? It was under 27 minutes, right? And Geb held on to him as long as he possibly could. And Bekele, that sort of really kicked off his career, because within a couple of years, and Geb was still around competing, within a couple of years, Bekele had obviously broken the world record in the 5K and then the 10K, and had started this run of 4 consecutive world championship 10,000 meter titles. But yeah, it's just funny. And I think it's also because the fact that he's stuck around and he's still running. Yeah, I mean, we remember him in his heyday, kind of like that 5,000 meter masterpiece at the Olympics in Beijing, where he,
I think is still, personally think is the greatest middle distance or distance performance, either men or women, in the history of the Olympics.
Wow.
That 5,000.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it was such a great race, just the construct of it, the fact that it was a clear plan. He was terrified of losing to a 1,500 meter guy again in Bernard Lagat. And because Lagat had won the world 5,000 meters and the world 1,500 the year before. And so to actually put that plan into action, such a difficult plan, which needed, like it's not easy to reach 3,000 meters in about 8 minutes, and then basically go out and attempt to run a sub 4 mile through to one lap to
Didn't
go.
he
But
run
he
like?
did it, and
Didn't
he
he run
broke him.
4:58 or 4:57 for his last 2000s around that mark?
Yeah,
And
so
not
he
yeah, you go.
No, I was going to say he ran. It was like 4:03 for the 4 laps from 3,000 to 4,600, and then he ran 53.8.
53:84.
Yeah, for the
83.
last lap.
And he was
like you
cruising
said,
that last 100 as well. He with the little Bekele
Yes.
little grin and little
he
finger in the
smiled
air.
with 100 to go.
Yeah.
Did the ovette.
And also that pace was a little bit varied too around,
Mm.
between the last, 4 or 5 laps. It wasn't like linear, like dropping the hammer. It was sort of jumping around. Then he ran the 53 on top, and he put the blowtorch on the man who became the greatest, indisputably the greatest marathon runner of history,
Right.
who had beaten him allegedly as an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
He was young. I don't know if he was 18 at the World Champs in 03, the big matchup, Geb, Al-Garouj and Bekele. And so it's not like Kipchoge never had a dog in the race. He was right in there with him, and he just blew his doors off. I think that's what ultimately sort of planted the seed that Kipchoge was going to go the marathon. Right?
Yeah. So I mean, I mentioned that he is still, though, even though he's around today, and it's crazy because still being around today, he's had some sort of, I guess you could say, there were failures in major marathons, etc. He doesn't seem that good. But I was looking up his stats, doing a bit of research for this. Still, the last couple of years, he's run sub 2:05 for the marathon, even at his age and this advanced state in his career. I mean, when you look at his career, just top to bottom, world records over 5 and 10K with very limited pacing, no wave light out there. When he ran 12:37.35, he only had pacing through to 2K in that one, so less than halfway. When he ran 26:17, it was pacing only through to 5K. He did the 5:10 double in Beijing, and then a year later in Berlin. 4 consecutive 10K titles, obviously starting with the torching of Geb in 03, but then the classic, or the big one, man, that just sort of gets overlooked, are the 5 world cross country doubles. And that was back in time when World Cross, the moniker was always the hardest race in the world to win. And to win 5 straight to come back on back-to-back days over the short course and long course, that surely separates him from anybody else. Right.
As an example of the greatness of both Bekele and Geb, all the fans out there, go and watch the Great North Run. Just type into YouTube, Bekele, Farah, Gebrselassie, and it's got about the last 5 minutes of that race. I can't remember what year it was. It was mid to 20-teens, or maybe late
17.
17. So Geb was obviously over 40. And he was alleged to be a lot older than that, given the the thing with Ethiopian passports. So Geb hung on till the last, I believe, K or 1200, and then you had Farah in his peak, as Salazar described, a greyhound with that, just not necessarily the fastest time trialist out there, but man, a hard guy to beat. And that's why he won all those global titles in the 5 and 10. And you've got Bekele just dropping the hammer on him, and Farah almost coming back. It's an exhilarating rush to watch the Farah try, but then that encapsulates the longevity and just greatness of those. I was going to say 2, but those 3 athletes. But yeah, Bekele is just, and he's quite far past his prime in terms of by that stage, and that became more of a sort of 5-10 type of, like, that was a better gauge of who was better over 5-10 at that point. So rather, because it wasn't a super like lightning quick race like we see these days with Sebastian Saur and the other guy that just broke the world record, Kiplimo. So I thought that was a good indictment of just how great he is. The fact he could, torch the greatest, who was then the greatest 5-10 guy of his generation, put the acid down on him. And that's what those other guys, so I'm rambling a bit, but that's what those other guys from that era should have done to Farah and never did to Farah. Right. And I just wonder
he got dropped in that one too, remember? Like at some point they kind of dropped him off the pace, and then usually that's in a distance race, a death knell, to have like the toughness to come back And then like you said, Farah then comes back at him really hard in that last 100 meters, but Bekele holds on. It's one of the great road races of all time.
It is.
Looking at just looking at Bekele's marathon career, because obviously he's going to run this marathon in New York, and it's also against Kipchoge, so that's going to be sort of a really interesting father time matchup there. Neither of them will probably win. I say that with a fair amount of confidence, but it's going to be really interesting to see how they match up versus each other. 2:01:41. It's easy to forget he ran 2:01:41. He's still the third fastest marathon runner of all time. That was only 2 seconds off the world record in Berlin. And it was almost like he kind of missed it because he didn't realize incredibly how close he was to it. He sort of faffed around from sort of a K to 400 to go, if I remember correctly, when it looked like he really could have dropped the hammer harder and just missed it. Do you know that if he had done that, he would have been the 5,000, because Cheptegei hadn't come along and broken his world records yet. He would have been the world record holder in the 5K, the 10K, and the marathon. Here's a good trivia question for you. Do you know the last person that was able to achieve that?
So you just clarify the question. So is that holding the 5, 10, and marathon at the same
Simple
time?
One, 5, 10 marathon, all at the same time. Who was
Zatopek?
last? It was Zatopek. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Crazy. Back in 1952. I mean, that basically would have. I mean, at that point there, you even question whether that would make him not just the greatest distance runner of all time, the greatest runner of all time, and maybe even potentially the greatest, tough to say, marathon, because he didn't quite have the same accolades as Kipchoge. But I always thought the benefit Kipchoge had too was doing that Breaking 2 project with Nike. He still did a lot of running like at that speed, and people turn around and say, yeah, but it was in the controlled conditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he still got the muscle memory of running the marathon distance in under 2 hours, which 100% translated to running a legit marathon. And Bekele never had that. And honestly, if Kipchoge hadn't been around, there may have been a good chance that Kenesisa Bekele was that athlete that Nike focused on to kind of lead the charge on the sub 2. And we could be talking about him as a guy who, ran 1:59 and change for the marathon distance, even in a controlled environment. Just absolutely crazy how good his career is, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on Bekele?
Now, we better move the topics along. So I've only got 25 minutes. I know we've got a couple other ones.
I think we've only got one left anyway.
What's
today.
that? Okay, so on Bekele, if we've got a bit more time then.
Oh, yeah.
Not to be the negative one, but I kind of get when you said, Bekele's running in New York, I feel like it's that movie with Bill Murray, Groundhog Day, though, because every time it's announced like Bekele's running this, and I'll turn the TV on. It's probably happened 3 times I can remember in my little living room.
He's pulled out after
you see him like
22K.
limping off, or he's freaking like a K behind the leaders after like 20K, and it's just like I kind of feel like, if he's just doing it because he loves the sport, like Geb did. But if he's doing it to still try, you sort of get, it's a bit like with LeBron James now, in LA. It's like, why are you still, it's not newsworthy to me anymore. It's like, Bekele's running. And then it's just like, no, I don't know. I just kind of like, whatever.
No, I'm sort of with you. I'm with you too. Like it's, I saw this news come out and I'm like, it's definitely news of interest, right? Because he's, running a major marathon again. But I agree. It does seem like Groundhog Day. The amount of times you've heard Bekele's in London and Bekele.
I feel like in like 20 years, it's like Bekele's running Rotterdam or something. It's like he's 60. It's like great.
Yeah, he's entered in the 55 to 60-year-old age group. Is it newsworthy? The greatest runner of all time. Well, I mean, just quickly, do you think that any of this, it doesn't detract from his legacy, or does it? I mean,
no, it doesn't. Right. Who cares? Like it's just. People are too. I think it's a little bit. What's the word? I think there's a lot of conceit in the concept of a legacy. It's like no one actually cares. You're a great athlete, and as long as you don't get caught for drugs or do anything really like salacious in the public forum, you're a great. What's the difference between you or I or anyone else that loves running? Continue, and then giving up and then coming back. No one's looking at it and analyzing and going, like he ruined his. if you are, I think you're not really getting the meaning of life. Like, he clearly loves competing still. It's part of him. And he goes out there and runs. He doesn't look like the sort of guy who's beating his chest for attention. I don't get that vibe from him. I think he just loves the sport, and he probably doesn't know how to do anything else. Probably gives him more self-esteem.
We might know a few athletes, mate, that are concerned about their legacies. You know,
we probably do.
But I mean, no, I do agree with you. But you have to admit there is something pretty badass about El Garouge back in 2004. Just basically after winning that 5K, he was entered to run, I think, a 3K in Brussels a few weeks after, and was like, "Nah, I'm done." And those were like the last two races that we ever remember. Oh, well, that's the 5K is the last race he literally ever ran on the track as a competitive professional. And the last two finals, we remember him winning the 1500 and 5K. You can't really do much better than that. It's almost a bit like if Michael Jordan, a lot of people lament that he should have retired after the 98 finals when he hit the final, game-winning shot over Byron Russell, and it just walked away. That would have been just like the fitting end. Of course, he came back and played for the Wizards and was still very good, but it didn't have the same feeling. But yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Anyway, should we move forward onto another all-time great? I mean, we can call him an all-time great because I think he is already, Jakob Ingebrigtsen. So this news just came out in the last couple of days. I thought it was definitely worth having a yarn about. Obviously, a really tough season for him, the one that's just ended. Couldn't get himself fit the entire year, was always going to make a comeback, then he couldn't. He ran 3:45 flat for the mile indoors. Everybody thought it was green light for 1500 world record, mile world record, 5K world record, and he ends up crashing out in the 1500 meter heats in Tokyo. Not much of a surprise there. Did extremely well to make the 5K final, and actually, as the last qualifier for that, and then at some point was leading the race with about a mile to go. But obviously a bit of a write-off season for him. But I just read Norwegian article that he is coming back, hopefully fit and healthy as always, and is looking to target, which I think this is kind of incredible. Love to get your thought on this. The 1500, the mile, and the 5K world record for next season. What's your first take when you hear that?
Well, it's quite fitting. Quite a fitting segue from the last topic about legacy and caring what people think. I mean, I got to give him his dues. Like, I saw this article where he effectively said, well, "What would you guys want to criticize me for my performance at the World Champs? But what would you respect me more if I did what almost anyone else would do and sat at home and that you couldn't see how out of shape I was and how much I sucked?" So he's got a point, and I think it's that irreverence and that spirit to get after it no matter what. And from what I've read, Walker, saw a great article on Walker back in the 70s. It was this whole it was a headline, or it was maybe a title for a book of something like he was a perpetual winner, and I think it was Agnew or someone like that said no, he actually wasn't. He was a guy who would line up no matter what and compete, and it was more have spikes, will race. That was more the ethos of John Walker. I feel like Jakob is the modern day Walker in the sense he's a sort of swashbuckling, pioneering, buccaneering dude who's totally irreverent, turns up, races. He loves the sport. He's getting after it. As to whether he can do that, when I saw that as well, that headline, I think it's very polarized or very binary. I think he's either kind of like blown up a bit, and this is a continuation of the kind of social media beat up at the World Champs of like, I'm here, look at me, blah, 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 going a bit weird after the whole family drama. And also he's won a lot. He's got his child, he's got his, he's married. And is he like, oh, I'm going to go for these records, and he's just a shadow of the athlete he used to be? Or is it for real and he is legitimately a shot at these records? I think it all depends on what he's actually doing behind the scenes in terms of, is that gnarly dude, is he still that gnarly dude who's now annoyed he didn't do well this year and he's going to show everyone? I think it's one way or the other. He's either going to be superb and I think a contender at very least for the mile and say the 5,000, or he's just going to continue to drop way down. I couldn't. We don't know. We don't know what it's almost intangible property that, as you know, as an Olympian yourself, is he like waking up in the morning and being pretty bloody like determined, like, oh my God, there's a problem here if I don't achieve what I've stated I want to? Or is he waking up in the morning going, no, I'm going to set some records and, blah, blah. Who knows?
Yeah, it's tough in
He
the
may not even he may not even know himself, because we don't understand subconscious. Does he know himself?
Maybe
how
he's
determined
just
he
one
is?
of those people that needs to put something out there publicly to get himself motivated, to almost create some level of accountability. It's just tough in this era of like social media and sort of extreme comments and big hubris and all this kind of stuff. We see it from a lot of the guys. We see it from Josh Kerr. We've seen it from the sprinters forever. We see it from Lyles. You just wonder if this is just sort of youthful hubris from him, or if he's really serious about it. The only
You
thing I
probably
would
follow this
say,
more than me with him, but has he done this before? Has he said? Because I don't remember him ever really going, I'm going to beat these records before. I don't remember him talking a lot. I think it's more like a Kerr thing to be talking a lot.
Yeah, no, and that's why I felt.
Mm.
I think I made the comment to you coming into Tokyo. A lot of people are like, maybe he's extremely fit behind the scenes. The logic or the rationale was he came off injury last year, and this is in 2024. Remember, he'd been injured throughout sort of spring period between indoors and outdoors. He came out and he got beaten by Kerr and Prefontaine in the mile, but he still ran 3:45, which is really good. And then it was the same situation this year. He runs 3:45, and so indoors, and then had this long pause. I think a lot of people made this connection, were like, well, is he really fit? And then when he turned up in Tokyo, I have to admit, the very first thing, and I don't follow him on social media, but I did see it because it was on Let's Run. There was that video clip of him walking through arrivals, and he's like, in the caption, what content do you guys want to see first? And I thought to myself, that was a massive red flag for me, to the point where I'm like, I've never seen him do this before. He doesn't talk about this kind of stuff. It just doesn't fit. And I thought, this seems like a kind of affront for the reality that maybe he's not in shape. And that leads me to have a little bit of concern.
Yes.
These kind of comments are almost like a feigned attempt at creating interest around himself and maybe a bit of self-confidence. Now, that may not be the case, but that's sort of my gut feeling, because even in those other years, like you just pointed out, I can't imagine when he did actually break world records, 2 mile, 3,000 meters, 2,000 meters, ran very fast over 1,500 and the mile. I can't remember him ever making these proclamations.
It's incredible how in the world of social media, the intrusiveness of it, how little clips of people's behavior you can glean kind of what's going on. I remember with my sports cards, Gary Vee was talking about how, because of his management company with his brother, he knows more about these people behind that, people that are the athletes behind the scenes. And he was talking about Ja Morant, and this is way before the gun stuff. And someone asked him about Ja Morant, and he started to say, I know more about the thing. And I heard, he caught himself because he thought, I don't want to get in trouble here. I don't want to say anything about Ja Morant's character. Then I saw a clip of Ja Morant in a diner with some lady, calling himself the Black Jesus and tipping it like $1,000 or something. And I thought, because I collect a few Morant cards, should have sold them because they were sky high then. And then, of course, the trouble with the gun thing and all that. And then I thought at the time, or maybe I'm just reading too far into it. So I don't think you're off the money. I think that when you showed me that, what do you think of this? And you didn't pre-populate my thoughts. I'm like, that's kind of a different guy. Yeah. And, you can say, it's just don't be, what's the word? Don't have analysis paralysis and all that. Yeah. But it's kind of a different, it's a different vibe of the guy who was so singularly focused. And before we get critical of it, I mean, and I know we're not, before people are critical of it, it's just like that guy's life would have been on what's come out in that trial. I wouldn't swap places for him, even to be Olympic champion and have all that money, because growing up with a father like that, even if he didn't physically bash him, man, that wouldn't have been much fun. No, he was like a guinea pig.
Yeah.
I
think I mean to round things off on a practical sense, it just seems like a really difficult thing to do. I mean, we talk a lot about how these great athletes, irrespective of the distance, whether you look at Kipkeita, Rudisha, Algarouge, Bekele, Gebb, Coleman, all these guys, they've only got a limited window in their career where they are really able to sustain the insane level of fitness and form, right? And you're constantly dodging injury because you have to be training up the red line to be so good to be able to even contemplate running these world records. And honestly, if you look at Jakob and sort of say, hey, when was the year that he really came to prominence, where he really started hitting his stride in terms of what his career potential and ceiling is? I'm going to say it was probably 2023. So that means we've had 2023, we've had 24, we've lost 25, and now we're really looking at 26. I wouldn't say definitively it would be the final year because he did miss 25, even though I don't think that a year, let's say he decided to, go on a, year-long cruise with his wife while they were pregnant and having a child and just took a year off. I don't think that's the same as the energy and the emotional toll that you spend like recovering from an injury for a year, because obviously he was trying to come back all the time. So I don't know if that sort of adds or tacks another year onto that window or not, but it would just seem crazy also the way that we know that he trains, which he isn't one of these, anaerobic power athletes in the same mold of a Morcelli and Algarouge. We know that the way that he reaches his fitness is a lot of volume. It's a ton of volume. And so therefore the training requirements for the 1500 and the 5K in particular are going to be different and very, very taxing. And so I just wonder, man, if I would have a little bit of fear or trepidation that if he legitimately tries to get in shape to run the 15 mile and the 5K record all in the same season, the guy's coming off an injury that was an overuse injury to begin with, right? And is it just coincidence, right, that when he started talking more about the 5K world record, remember there was this potential that he was going to go after in Oslo this season, right? So he must have been doing more work tailored towards the 5K as well. Is it any coincidence that this overuse injury with his Achilles sort of came to the forefront? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Like, just to end the conversation, if I'm him, I think I would be looking at that mile record, right? I think I've said it before to you, to anybody that wants to listen. It's just an opinion. I think the 1500 record is beyond him. I don't quite think he has the same physiological tools as Algarouge did and that you need to run that record. The mile record, though, as you pointed out, is a weaker record and it's there for the taking. And if he gets that, right, he sort of not only does he take a legit Algarouge record from the record book and expunges it and replaces, Algarouge's name with his, it puts him just in that mix, because as great as the 3K record is, as great as the 2K record, the 2 mile, etc., they don't hold the same prestige as that mile does. And even the 5K, it's still a bit of an unknown for him, because still, as we're sitting here talking today, his PR is 12:48. That's still 13, 14 seconds off the world record, right? That is going to be a big ask. So if I'm him, man, I'm really looking to get that mile, get my name in the books, and then let's see how things fall for the 5K. And maybe next year there's still an opportunity for him.
He's trained at a really high level with all that
For a long
familial pressure as well for a long time. And also, neither his brothers had particularly long careers.
No.
And it reminds me a little bit of Craig Mottram, how, he was also great as a young man, and then did like apocryphally noteworthy workouts where he was just this superhuman guy, and then he was gone.
Right.
I don't think it's unfeasible that may be happening here, because I used to think to myself, man, unless he's doping, and I don't believe he is, anything I've read or heard or feel, then how can your body handle, because it's sort of 1.3x what any other great has been able to do in terms of the volume and the sustained racing. And it's freaky that he's even got this far without having problems. The Olympic champion was 20 in the 1500.
19, I think. Or
19. No, I think it's just turned 20 or around 20. And winning all those 5K titles against the Africans. I mean, you have, either you are dirty, which I don't believe he is, or the volume you've done as a young guy to beat all those Africans born at sea level over 5,000. you've basically got the miles on the clock of a 30 or 32-year-old. So I wouldn't be shocked. But it is Jakob Ingebrigtsen. I equally wouldn't be shocked if he came out and ran 12:33 because he's Jakob Ingebrigtsen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you had the choice, what would you rather have? Actually, good question to round out. If you could take if you just Shane Rohde, I'm going to give you God of sports power. Well, I'm going to assume God of sports power here. You can either have in the record books as of tomorrow, and the world will just assume that you did this in a race in your prime, mile world record or the 5K. What would you rather have?
Oh, it's the mile.
Yeah. It's still a big
100%.
record, right? It's a great record.
No one cares about the 5K record outside of track. And to be the mile world record holder, that would be even within the sport in a nerdy sense, but also out of the sport.
Yes.
You know, breaking a 28-year, is it? 27-year-old world record? Yeah. It's the advancement of the human race encapsulated in one event. 100%.
Yes. It is, because I'm surprised that there's anybody out there that, well, here's a good one for you. What's more prestigious, the mile or the 15? It's still the mile, isn't it?
Well, that's what I thought you were going to ask me, whether I would rather have the 15 or the mile and the mile and the 5 to really load it towards me picking the mile and the 5. To me, I'm unequivocal. I'm a nerd of the sport. The 1500 has become the mile in the modern. The mile's never raced, and that 1500 meter world record. It is an apocryphal, not to use the same fancy word twice in a 5-minute period, but it's like a mythical record. Was it even 3:26.00 with the drama?
That's an awesome episode we need to do.
Yeah, the drama with the clock. It's El Garouge's mythical record. And if anyone runs, Kiprop ran it and then he got caught for drugs. So like 3:26. Can someone run 3:25.98? Crazy for 1500 meters. I think it's just cool. It's just
within the sport, though, because outside.
Yeah, no, but we are with it. We're squarely within the sport, and our fan base is like within of the sport.
Yeah,
yeah. I just think the 1500.
Because the mile though, it's definitely a universal thing. Because if you ask any high school athlete around, for example, the United States of America, and I know this is being a little bit US centric about the mile, everybody knows the mile, right? A lot of British people, they know. They understand the significance of the 1500, but there'll always be this attachment to the mile because of Bannister and the sub 4 and the gravity of that moment. So, I think it's very, very close, because yes, you're right. The 1500 is run far more often. There's far more attempts at it, but the mile will always hold just this prestige of being this odd distance that still everybody knows about. Like the Bannister breaking 4 for the mile, right, is still universally regarded when you talk about great human athletic achievements, right? Like by almost anybody, we climbed to the top of Mount Everest, right? Edmund Hillary climbs to the top of Mount Everest. That was seen as as a moment of, human endurance and awesome physiological achievement. And the mile is put there on the same level. So, obviously I understand the significance and the difficulty of that 1500 record as well, but the mile it's sneaky close for a number of other sort of
the barrier,
non-quantifiable measures.
To play devil's advocate, though, I agree with you, but I can there's incontrovertible merit to your point, but everything is a social construct, everything is arbitrary, and the sport, where the sport has gone in the last 25, 30 years is to the 1500. And the mile, there was the barrier there, and it came out of the imperial system. I get all that, but I just think it's lost its luster even within the public. And you're in the US, so that's a sort of a bias to the college system. It's the mile, but in Europe, it's 1500 miles never run. Hey, Trump may ban the 1500. It wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility. He might say, no, 1500, it's the mile. It's got a great history.
Yeah, that's true.
He may ban it. And you put a tariff on it.
You tariff the mile. I mean, you saw the significance it held with Kip Yeagon anyway in that attempt. But yeah, interesting stuff. Good luck to Jakob. I mean, I think at the end of the day, all things equal, let's just hope that Jakob gets back and is healthy, because the sport is unequivocally better with him in it, healthy, at the front of races. And even if he's not as good as he has been in the previous 2 or 3 years, he's still going to be right up there. And he's just a great a great positive figure in the sport to just have out there representing the sport in Europe and around the globe. Yeah.
He's incredible. He's wicked. I've got to go in about 7 or 8 minutes. However, I've got a hot take for
We
you.
can wrap now if you want.
No. I want to get this one out there.
Oh,
so
yeah,
because this irks me the way things often would irk more you than me, but this irks me as a man,
Is that backhanded
self-proclaimed
compliment there, or I don't know?
self-proclaimed man of who understands the law and how it should be applied. So I just saw, when I was having a bit of a sort of dig on Lex Run to see if things we could discuss today, I just saw the headlines and I clicked briefly in the articles before dinner about Ruth Genetic and her, the latest on her.
Yeah.
Now, what I read is that you would have read it too, is they found text evidence, something to do with testosterone drugs, and then an implausible explanation around taking her maid's medication. And then her ban got moved from 2 years to 4 years. But they took a year off for the fact that she didn't fight it. She accepted that her explanation was implausible. However, here's the thing that irks me no end. So apparently they're not necessarily going to remove her 209. I put a call out to the powers that be. Old Sebi, if you're listening, big fan of ours. You need to.
We're going to petition him, or you've already done this.
I might write to write to the Lord himself. But no, but on a serious note, they need to find a way to get rid of that record, because if you've got an athlete who has taken an already pretty hard to believe 211 when Paula suffered all that scuttlebutt around 215 to 209, and this person has been found have not only have diuretics in their system, then to give an implausible excuse they took their maid's medicine, and furthermore, WhatsApp messages showing she was using testosterone, and the implausibility of running 209, which was faster, you and I talked about this, than the 2017 men's winner of one of those, is it Boston. Chicago or Boston?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got it in the interests of all the other women. It's not a men-woman thing, but all the other athletes, or in this case, women in the sport, you've got to find a way to remove that, expunge that record, because otherwise you're looking at a situation like with Keeley now trying to break the 800. Sydney should be the world record holder in the women's 400, and it's just not as alluring to the public if these all-time great athletes like SML and Keeley can't get within a hair's breadth of those records, which history has shown, or what's subsequently been revealed to be highly questionable, if not indisputably dirty records. So that's my little rant on that. They've got to find a way through the system to get to that 209. That's what a judge in law does. You know, and this may be surprising to some people, but the law works in mysterious ways. The judge, when they're presented, say, from a prosecution for a murder trial or something, it's not supposed to work like this, and the law textbooks don't tell you it works like this. They say it has to apply the statute and has to meet like a checklist, tick off everything. Okay, how it actually works a lot of the time is that the judge is a human just like you know, the rest of us, and he has a gut about what's going on, and they have to kind of reverse engineer and fit within the law, so it doesn't, because the law develops by analogy, so they have to fit it in so it can't be easily attacked as going, well, clearly the statute, the Parliament's mind, or the mind of the people through the democratic process said this is what you have to prove this charge. But the problem here is that I lost my train of thought there, but there needs to be a way that everyone's gut says this person was fueled by drugs to run 209. It's the job of the authorities to go, how are we going to fit this into our system so that record's removed? It's just not correct to leave it there. It's close enough that they've got to find a way.
Yeah, I mean, I made this point, I think it was when I did the solo part, when you went here, about the way that the law works, because I remember another lawyer friend telling me about this. It's not always just a literal interpretation, word for word for word, because if you were to do that, there's so many loopholes where the law just wouldn't apply, and there is like a common sense factor that, like you said, judges go in and say, yeah, okay, so if we're going to pick apart every word here and apply your context to it, yes, there is a possibility that you'll get off, but you're not going to, because I know exactly what you tried to do here and how the law applies. Almost like the essence of that law overrides the actual literal interpretation. And what you're saying here is the same sort of thing. And you are right, because there's absolutely no way that she, ran sub 2:10 for the marathon, and then all of a sudden was like, okay, now it's time that I need to start doing what I was doing. And to your point, then it's just so disappointing that you've got this outlandish performance. And all I would say to this, and since we're going to petition Seb about it, is that it's very, very easy. And I'm sure that the powers that be back in the IAAF at the time, when all these world records, and I always use the Flojo one as sort of a yardstick here. Flojo runs this time in Indianapolis at the US Olympic trials, right? And back in 88, and there was clearly a malfunction with the equipment, right? Everybody's running around trying to save face. You've got the timing company Omega, they're using these new wind gauges. They're like, no, it wasn't our stuff. It wasn't this or this. And a decision has to be made on the spot. Hey, we were in the stadium. We know there was wind there. The wind reading was 0.0. It is clearly not that. We cannot ratify the record. But then I'm sure the easy option comes and somebody's like, well, there's going to be a lot of egg on our face here. If we do, let's just leave it. And eventually someone's going to break the world record. She may do it in Seoul, or it'll happen within the next, don't worry about it, right? You cannot take that point of view. You cannot just say, hey, well, everybody's getting better at the moment in the marathon, and super shoes are evolving and pacing is evolving, and we'll sweep it under the carpet, and someone will naturally come along and take this record, and we won't have to talk about it, because you could land in a Flojo situation where 50 years on, you've still got 209.56 or whatever that record is sitting in the books, because it's just impossible to break.
You know the answer to this question, so I'm being a little bit purposefully emotive and silly about this. But what is the biggest difference, the biggest reason why women can't compete with men in sport?
Yeah, well, you say it.
Testosterone.
Yeah, testosterone, exactly.
So she's got messages about taking testosterone on her phone, and she ran 209. So unless you want all the other women who want to break the world record, which there will be many, to take testosterone, I mean, it's not like in the cases of, and this is sort of a sweeping statement here, but generally the courts have to look where the interests of justice lie. And so in this case, the only party other than every other athlete, the only party's interests to consider her are hers. And she's admitted she's not fighting a ban. She's effectively tantamount to, I don't know if word for word she admitted it, but she's effectively gone away quietly and said, I'd rather have 3-year ban than 4. Yeah. You're innocent. You're going to fight that. So it's tantamount to admitting she was using drugs, right? Then where are the innocent parties' interests to think about here to counterbalance against everybody else's interests? I would even argue that it should be, when you've got I've just done one of these recently, the court's trying to resolve between two innocent or relatively innocent parties. And this was the case of a boundary dispute where everyone in more or less terms was innocent, compared to, say, when someone's been accused of murder and it's a high chance they've done it. So in this case, you've got someone who's clearly guilty of taking drugs. So where is the need to counterbalance the other athletes, her interests against everybody else's? The answer is there is no need to, because you can say if anyone is, not innocent, it's her. And every other woman out there trying to break this record now, you've got someone who's been admitted some sort of doping and they've found messages on her WhatsApp of taking testosterone, and you're not going to ban that record?
Yeah.
Expunge that record?
But you know why, right? It's easy to understand why it sets this precedent of world athletics. And I guess they look at it and say it sets this dangerous precedent where you could have an athlete, because here's the reality. She went to Chicago. She ran this time in Chicago. She didn't fail a drug test, right? I mean, for whatever reasons, she didn't fail a test. It was only when she goes to Chicago, runs this crazy time, world athletics are like, oh my goodness, a woman has just run under 2:10 for the marathon. We need to put them on this AIU watch list. And we referenced this in an earlier pod about just what a great job Co has done by creating this AIU, which is so crucial to catching these athletes. Otherwise, you'd never catch anybody. It's the only way they ever get them, right? And it's only because she went on the watch list where then they were able to have somebody who was monitoring her saying, okay, so she's done this and this and this and this, and if you test her on this particular day, you're going to get her. And that's how they did. And it's just, I can understand the trepidation of world athletics with respect, but I'm going to sort of afterwards explain my proposition here. I can understand why they're like, hey, if you do not test positive when you've done the performance, we find it difficult to expunge the record. But I am with you where I would just be like, they need to change these rules and just have a caveat and say, we are the global governing body and we have full control over what our records are. There's no regulation committee that they need to ask about what their freaking world records are, right?
Totally,
they don't have to go and
totally
check
arbitrary.
it with the FBI or
it's totally
UNICEF.
Arbitrary. This rule that, like temporal, i.e., timing sense, it's actually of any significance whatsoever. When you took drugs in your records, they should just say, if you ever get caught, and I'm not talking about something where you have like an R.J. Wilson, the meat tainting, or something that there should be tiers like of plausible deniability to, whether you took drugs. So, but if anyone gets caught with a diuretic, and moreover, if anyone gets sanctioned and then agrees to take a 3-year term rather than originally a 2-year term without any vehement denial, then you should lose the record.
Yeah.
Because that's tantamount to accepting you took drugs.
And you know what else it is, Shane? It's also, you've got to create the incentive to not do this, right? And if you create, like, it's real simple to test this, to test the principle. If you were to say it's like littering, okay? If there was a public ordinance out there in the city of Auckland, right, which was like, if you are seen littering, it is a $500,000 fine. Like, if you are caught on CCTV or a cop or somebody catches you, it's 500. Now, obviously, that would never be the case, but I guarantee you, if just even the threat of that existed, nobody would just throw their shit on the ground like they do, like so many awful people do, because the incentive to not do it would be so high, right? Because it'd be such a punitive thing. You've got to add this into track and field, because right now the incentive to cheat for a lot of athletes in certain countries far outweighs the disincentive to cheat. And I think you've got to do those things and turn around and say, we have the power to expunge you from the record books. All of your performances, even backdating prior to the performance where we think you may have been cheating, we have the right to get rid of them if we want, as if you never existed as an athlete. And I think if you did that, you would start to see things slowly.
Should get there on a principle basis as well, though, because the law is all about effectively regulating or deciding how to apply justice between the rights of various parties, right? So if you've got an athlete.
By the way, how's your time? I don't want you to.
I'm all right. I got a couple of minutes.
All right.
You got an athlete who has, and particularly if they've admitted it, right?
Sure.
More marginal cases, I'm not sure how I'd reconcile that with what I'm saying here. But if you're an athlete who's admitted taking drugs and accepted a ban, then that party's interests. How do you prefer that party's interests against every other athlete, given that they are more guilty in any conceivable way than any other athlete who's never had a sanction for drugs? And the answer is that by not revoking further previous records, you are preferring that party's interest to everybody else's, because they can't conceivably be said to be less guilty than everyone else. So on that basis, you can get there by going, I know it was 5 years earlier and we don't know you were doping then, but we caught you in the future, right? And it passes the gut test or the sniff test, going, so out of you, who we know has done something at some point, and these other people who have never been caught with anything, how do you reconcile it in favor of the person going, oh, well, we don't know for a fact that you were cheating back then, so we're not going to expunge it? Well, we know you did something wrong. We don't know you're doing it then. But so how do you prefer that party's interest and be, we need to be fair to you because it wasn't at the time. Actually, so we're going to favor you over people who have never done anything wrong. It's irreconcilable. Just quickly on that note, and a little sort of silly anecdote before I go. I don't know about their public ordinance. I'll tell you a story. So Johnny Heighton, our mate, sold me a BMW M3 about 4 or 5 years ago. And when I took it for a test drive, I went on the motorway down in Onehunga and I fanged it on the on-ramp. And the sticker, when you buy a new car and it's got the sticker, I had all the windows down because I wanted to see if this thing sounded good. And the thing blew out the window, and someone rang the council and said I was littering. And I said, I'd never do that. I'm not 18 or 15. I wouldn't throw things out. And they said, no, it's the council person said, they're certain. I said, well, I want to challenge this. And they said, well, you can't. It's a strict liability offence, which means that I said, so wait a minute. So I can't, it's strict liability, which means that you basically can't fight it. If someone says, how does that work? So I could just go and say anyone else litters. I said, well, can I have the details of the person who said I was littering? I said, well, why do you want those? I said, because A, I'm going to challenge it and challenge their credibility. And B, as soon as this is over, I'm going to go and make a complaint that they're littering. And they're like, the guy goes, you can't do that. I said, yes, I can, because that's what they've done to me. And they go, oh, because they said I wrote a thing in it. And they said, no, they saw a hand go out the window. I said, what? Out of the back left window when I was driving and no one else was in the car? I must have long hands.
Classic stitch up. So did you ever actually have to?
I paid it because years earlier I got done for not wearing a seatbelt. And I got Shafraz Khan to represent me in the district court. Yeah, and we
legend.
We took on this young Chinese cop who, and Shafraz cross-examined him, and he said he'd written the most tickets out of anyone in his year, and even the judge or the registrar had a wry grin on his face, and this guy's writing tickets left, right, and centre, and they end up halving my fine and all the time it took to deal with it. So I begrudgingly paid this fine. Otherwise, I was going to have to spend hours going off to court and having this Nelly nuisance or Nigel nuisance turn up and try to argue whether in fact I had littered. But so I don't know about the public ordinance, but I get your point.
Yeah. Well, on that topic, when you're driving to Big E's birthday today, don't
throw anything out the window.
Don't throw anything out the window, mate. Yeah, that was good. Hey, look at that. It started off as a reflection podcast. I didn't know how much content we were going to have, and we found a way to entertain the people because we're the people's podcast.
Very good,
Shane. Yeah. Enjoy the rest of the day. Say happy birthday to the legendary E from me. And I guess we'll do this all in a week's time. And obviously we'll be waiting on all the viewers out there to fire in the ideas of what we can do to entertain ourselves and you on the podcast over the next couple of months.
Thanks, mate.
All right, mate. Have a good one, and we'll catch you next week.
See you, mate.
See ya.